Hi everyone, my name is Alex and it's so weird to finally be sitting down and filming something. Today I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read in 2021 and I'm going to be ranking them from 1 to 20. I only read 20 books this year. I have ADHD and I'm a very slow reader. We're working on it in 2022. I have a lot of opinions on a lot of popular books that nobody asks for. None of my friends read, so I'm just gonna scream into the void that is my camera and hopefully somebody gets something out of it. I'm gonna give these books a ranking, quick little synopsis, my thoughts on them. So that's kind of how this is gonna go. And I'm gonna go in chronological order. So the first book that I picked up was none other than Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This is the book that sparked my love for reading in 2021 easily. So this book is a modern retelling of the Iliad and it focuses on Patroclus, who is a prince that was exiled from his home and is forced to live with King Peleus and his perfect son Achilles. And you basically follow them leading up to and through the Trojan War. You see Patroclus and Achilles' relationship go from strangers to friends to something more. History would call them friends. We already know what's going on there. Just the way that this story is told, I was not expecting to like it. I thought it was going to be really overly historical. I feel like it was very accurate to the actual Greek myth, but it had such a good balance of fiction and history. Madeline Miller just has such a beautiful way developing these characters, and I just absolutely loved it. This book easily gets a 5 stars. This is going to take the #1 spot for now. I have a feeling it's going to stay there. So at this point, I had a lot of trust in TikTok, and I had been hearing a lot about 1,000 Boy Kisses by Tilly Cole, and I absolutely hated it. This was my very first 1-star read. And so this book basically follows some childhood best friends, Poppy and Rune. They grew up being neighbors and they had this really sweet friendship, and then one day out of nowhere, Rune moves away. This book kind of follows after he moves back and they reunite, but Rune's a little bit different. And there's a really sad twist that happens that affects both of them greatly. It was very sad, but I just found myself not connecting to any of the characters. The book tried to be so profound, but like we're dealing with 15-year-olds and like there were some monologues that they had that just were not realistic. Just for reference here, this is what I looked like at 15.
Oh my god, what is that? Oh my god, what is that?
So, and I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. I feel like it was very predictable. So for that reason, I gave it my first 1 star. There was a One Direction reference. I'll give it that. I'll give it half a star for that. I think, needless to say, it was definitely under Song of Achilles. And so the next book that I have the actual physical copy. It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. You've probably heard of this book already. It follows Lily Bloom, who just finished college and moves to Boston to start a little flower shop that she's always wanted to have, and it's super cute, and she ends up meeting Ryle Kincaid. And Ryle Kincaid is a very successful surgeon. They start dating and everything seems to be going perfect until it's not. And we kind of follow their relationship, but mainly focused on Lily's life, and we kind of see it fall apart. And this book tackles some very heavy topics. It does talk a lot about domestic abuse and the effects of domestic abuse. It's a really realistic story. It was really heartbreakingly beautiful and I really love this book. So yeah, that's It Ends With Us. This was a 4-star book for me, and so that puts It Ends With Us in between those two for now. Then immediately after reading It Ends With Us, I picked up Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover because this is another one that was getting a lot of hype. This book follows Kate Collins, who is a nursing student who's looking for a job. I believe it's after college, and she moves in with her brother Corbin into his apartment in San Francisco. And on her first day of moving in, she sees a guy passed out in the hallway, and she's like, hey, what's good? And she later finds out that this is Miles Archer, who is Corbin's pilot friend. Classic pilot friend. So they hate each other at first. See where this is going. Over time, they form a casual relationship, and one thing that really sets this book apart is that we get a glimpse at Tate and Miles's previous relationships and the trauma that kind of went along with those relationships. It's dual point of view. The only thing that kind of bumped it down a little bit for me was that I didn't really like Miles that much, and Tate was fine. I didn't dislike her, but again, I didn't feel a really big connection to this book. There were some pretty good spicy scenes in this book too, so that gave it some points. I went ahead and gave it a 3 stars. I would still recommend it. It just wasn't super memorable for me, so yeah. I'm gonna put Ugly Love under It Ends With Us. The next book that I read was A Court of Thorns and Roses. So I was on my way back from Greece actually when I picked this up at the airport. Literally got stopped by the girl who was sitting next to me. She was like, oh my god, I'm so excited for you to be reading this. Like, I wish I could read it for the first time again. So picked it up, started reading it on the plane, and I was kind of interested in the plane, and then I couldn't get through it. It was just like a wall. I actually downloaded the audiobook and I tried listening to it that way, and I just couldn't connect to it. And the world building was really good too, but there was just something about it that I could not physically make myself keep reading. For that reason, I give it a 1 star. And my very first DNF. So yeah, that's A Court of Thorns and Roses. I'm gonna go ahead and put that near the bottom. After A Court of Thorns and Roses, I felt myself kind of falling into a reading slump, so I wanted to read something that was hyped up and that I felt like I would really like. The hard copy version of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and I thought I would for sure absolutely love this book. This book follows Addie LaRue, a girl who has a curse placed on her from when she was young. The curse states that she will live forever, but anybody who meets her will forget who she is. And so it's a really interesting premise. There's a lot of like time switching, so it'll go from present day and then it'll throw you back a couple decades. Unfortunately, this book was just really forgettable for me. I feel like I had just really high expectations for it, and don't get me wrong, the storytelling was really beautiful. There were too many details and like side stories that I feel like really didn't have to be there, and I could not tell you the first name of the love interest of the only guy who can remember Addie LaRue. So especially over time, realizing how little I remember from this book, it just has to be a 2-star read for me. And this really put me into a book slump, and I didn't read for 2 months. And so The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue is gonna go above A Court of Thorns and Roses. And so, desperate to get out of my reading slump after Addie LaRue, I decided to pick up Daisy Jones and the Six. Follows a 70s rock band headlining Daisy Jones. And she's this like badass, carefree woman who's insanely talented at songwriting and singing, and we see her from childhood to the point where she's in this band. It follows Daisy Jones and Billy Dunn, and also the relationships of every other member in the band, see them rise up to fame and all the problems that come with that. What makes this book so unique is the fact that it's told in like an interview format, which I thought I wouldn't like, but it ended up being a really good way to kind of get a feel for the characters. Taylor Jenkins Reid is so good at making you fall in love with her characters. I gave it a strong 4 stars. I gave it a 5 stars when I first read it. It didn't quite blow me away that much, but it definitely did live up to my expectations. And in terms of ranking, Daisy Jones and the Six is gonna come up right above It Ends With Us. So immediately after reading Daisy Jones and the Six, I wanted to jump back into another Taylor Jenkins Reid book. I'm so glad that I picked it up. I read 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Oh my god. I'm just gonna say I gave this book a 4 stars. Again, so close to a 5 stars, but it just didn't reach that 5 star. I'm very picky with my 5 stars, but I loved this book. It follows Monique, who is a writer, and she is approached by Evelyn Hugo's assistant, and Evelyn Hugo is this world-renowned actress, like a superstar, and Monique is kind of this small writer. She doesn't really have a big reputation. She's working for an agency. We follow kind of her interviews with Evelyn Hugo as she details each of her 7 marriages. And at this point, Evelyn Hugo is really old, and she's giving Monique the opportunity to be the only person to ever publish a book about her life. I was not expecting a gay romance in this book, but I was so pleasantly surprised. So I think Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is going to go right above Ugly Love at this point. I don't know what I was expecting next, but I ended up picking up a book that I hold so close to my heart. I think about this book very often, and it's my first Mariana Zapata book, From Lukov with Love. I wish I had the physical copy for this book. I'm probably going to end up getting it. And I want to preface this by saying I am a figure skater. I'm a little bit biased. This is a figure skating romance, and it follows Jasmine Santos, who is a solo figure skater who's kind of in a rut. She's in a slump in her skating career, and she's actually considering retiring. She has a lot of kind of spite for the guy who's at the top of the rink. His name is Ivan Lukov, and one day his coach approaches Jasmine and says, hey, listen, we have an opportunity that could save your skating career and also put Ivan in a really good light. We think you guys should do a season together as pair skaters. You see where this is going. She decides to do it to save her career. They end up training together. I feel like every scene made me so happy. I love that there was Latino representation, and I really loved Jasmine's character. She was so strong, so funny, and like genuinely funny. I absolutely loved it. So From Lukov with Love, it's gonna take the spot right under Song of Achilles for me. So after From Lukov with Love, I was ready to dive back into a really hyped up book. That was none other than The Hating Game. I hated it, and I was so surprised to hate it. I gave it 1 star. I feel like maybe I overwhelmed myself with so many romances at once, and maybe I was just kind of like expecting everything at that point. So this book focuses on Lucy. She works with a guy in her department named Joshua, and they've never gotten along. They don't like each other. They end up having to fight for the same position. I just found Lucy's character kind of insufferable. Just was constantly putting Joshua on such like a pedestal. Any opportunity she would get, she would call herself small and weak and fragile. At first I thought this book was really tailored toward younger readers. This romance was like the idea that I had in my head of what romance was when I was really young, but that doesn't really make sense because there's a lot of steamy scenes thrown in. I gave it a 1 star. On my list, it's gonna go above A Court of Thorns and Roses and under Addie LaRue. Maybe I'll read it again once the movie comes out. After this book, I wanted to read something that I knew that I was gonna like. There was a point in this year where my mental health just took a dive and I needed a reread. And so I picked up not just The Hunger Games, but also Catching Fire and Mockingjay. These are the same books that I've owned since like 5th grade, so I finally decided to reread them. I absolutely love them. I gave each of them a 5-star rating, so I'll start off with the first book. If you don't know what The Hunger Games is about, classic dystopian novel focusing on Katniss Everdeen. I can't even comprehend how I read this at that age. Like, this is almost too much for me now, and I ate this up at like 12 years old. I feel like reading this as I was older, I was able to appreciate Suzanne Collins' writing so much more. I love Katniss's character throughout each of the books. She's just like such a strong, solid character, and yeah, I think out of the 3 of them, unpopular opinion, Mockingjay was definitely my favorite. The only thing that changed reading them when I was older is how much I hate Gale. Like, Gale was so annoying in all 3 books. Anyway, I placed Hunger Games, Catching Fire, and Mockingjay right under From Lukov with Love. So coming off of 3 5-star reads, I went straight into Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey Mcquinston. I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. Every page made me very happy. This book follows Alex Claremont Diaz. He is the son of the President of the United States, who is a woman. Alex has a lot of beef with Henry, who is a prince in England. And so basically they have to fake that they're friends, and it eventually grows into something more. But it's done so well, and this is genuinely one of the only books that has made me laugh out loud. The spicy scenes were, and I just love every character. And so I put Red, White, and Royal Blue right underneath the Hunger Games trilogy. So next up, I read The Deal by L. Kennedy, and I ended up giving it a 3.5 stars. This book follows Hannah Wells, who's in college, and she has a really big crush on this guy. I believe his name was Justin. She does really well in her classes. After class one day, she bumps into Garrett Graham, who is on the hockey team. Wants Hannah to tutor him. Keeps bothering her to tutor him. He's like, listen, I can get you a date with Justin if you tutor me. And they end up forming a relationship. I found this to be a really cute book. It tackles a lot of important issues too. I feel like Hannah is a really lovable character and you do root for her, which I love. And I actually liked Garrett too. I feel like his character development was really sweet to watch. And so in terms of ratings, this one is going one above Ugly Love, and definitely under Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. After The Deal, I was gonna read the next book in the series, but I ended up actually picking up The Spanish Love Deception instead. And I gave it 2 stars. The Spanish Love Deception to me seemed really similar to The Hating Game. So this book follows Catalina Martin. She has this kind of enemy at work named Aaron Blackford. He keeps asking her to go with her to her sister's wedding because she's been frantically looking for somebody to go with her as her boyfriend. It's really, really important to her that she doesn't go alone. Her last relationship crashed and burned, and her ex was going to be at the wedding. Very much The Hating Game vibes. I found the same issues as I did with The Hating Game, to be honest. Maybe just workplace romances aren't for me. So for that reason, I gave Spanish Love Deception a 2-star rating. And so I'm gonna go ahead and put Spanish Love Deception above Ugly Love and under The Deal, because I do think it was a little bit more memorable for me than Ugly Love. And so the next book, another Mariana Zapata book, and that was The Wall of Winnipeg and Me. So The Wall of Winnipeg and Me focuses on Vanessa Mazur, and she starts off as an assistant for Aiden Graves, who is this superstar football player. He's nicknamed as the Wall of Winnipeg. You learn that he is a complete asshole to Vanessa. Eventually she quits. Out of the blue, Aiden shows up to her house and is like, hey, I want you back. And she's like, no. And he's like, well, listen, if you come back with me, then I will pay your entire tuition and get you a house. And she's like, okay. At the same time, an issue arises with his residency in Canada and he doesn't want to move back home, and so they decide to get married so that he can stay in Canada. Eventually it grows into something more. That was a really bad synopsis of the story, but I absolutely love this book. I gave it a 4 stars. The characters were just so well developed, and I usually don't like characters like Aiden Graves, but by the end of it I absolutely loved him, and I loved Vanessa too. I thought she was so admirable and such a girl boss. So Wall of Winnipeg and Me is gonna go above Daisy Jones and right under Red, White, and Royal Blue. And so after The Wall of Winnipeg and Me, I read my most taxing book of the entire year. It took me the longest. To recover from. I read A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. This book was genuinely life-changing for me. Like, I will not recommend this book to anybody. I feel like it is with really, really heavy topics. It's really, really sad. It focuses a lot on trauma and not a lot on healing. A lot of just the effects of trauma. A Little Life follows 5 men who we start off getting to know them as they're in college together as roommates, and we see them each grow into their professions, how they connect over the years, and it mainly focuses on Jude, who is a very tortured character with a very devastating past. I found a lot of life lessons in this book. It deals a lot with found families. I'm literally planning on making an entire video about this book. It's not for everybody at all. I think this is easily taking the #1 spot. It's a 5-star. It's going right above Song of Achilles, easily, and I can't think about it for too long or I'm gonna cry. So So the next book that I read is actually my first thriller book, and it's my most recent read, and it's Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. So this book follows Claire Scott. We first open with her and her husband gets tragically murdered right in front of her, and we find out that her younger sister Julia, years back, actually just went missing. Eventually she connects with her other sisters who she had a falling out with years back and hadn't spoken to in a long time, but together they uncover that the two instances are connected. And I found this to be a really scary book because it's like a very realistic horror story, and I gave it 3 stars. Very into character driven books, and I feel like this was a very plot driven book, which isn't a bad thing. I still thought it was really good, but it didn't blow me away. So for that reason, Pretty Girls is going right under Ugly Love and above The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. And then number 20 is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. This is a philosophy book. It's the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, and I've been really into Stoicism and Stoic philosophy. I feel like it's helped me a lot in the past year. It's basically a philosophy revolving around the idea of controlling what you can control and letting go of what you can't. Yeah, I mean, I recommend it. Honestly, I'm just including this one as otherwise I'd only have 19 books, so I'm gonna give it 5 stars. But I'm gonna put it at the bottom of the list. What an exciting end to this video. I started filming when it was light outside and it's pitch black now, so it's been a minute. So here is the final ranking. This is probably gonna change the more I think about it, but this is the final list for now. And yeah, that's all the books that I read this year. I'm so glad I was able to finally sit down and talk about all my favorite and least favorite books this year. I had so much fun filming. If you have any recommendations for me in terms of books or videos or anything else, please leave them down below. Thank you so much for watching, and yeah, hopefully I'll see you guys soon. Bye!